Waitress danced with a pale disabled boy, unaware his vampire king dad was watching. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was just another evening at the elegant restaurant where Anna worked. She had been on her feet all day, serving guests with the same tired smile she wore every day. The clinking of glass and soft murmur of conversation filled the air as she navigated between tables, delivering food and drinks. But tonight was different. As Anna approached a secluded corner of the dining area, she noticed a young boy, no more than 10 years old, sitting alone at a table. His skin was unnaturally pale, almost as if he had never seen the light of day. He looked fragile, his body hunched over, his face a picture of quiet sadness. Anna's heart tugged at the sight of him. He seemed so out of place in the luxurious surroundings of the restaurant. His clothes were neatly pressed but faded, and his eyes seemed distant, as if he were lost in a world of his own. Without a second thought, Anna walked over to the table. She bent down, offering him a gentle smile. "Hi there," she said softly, trying to make the boy feel comfortable. "Can I get you anything to drink?" The boy looked up at her with wide, amber eyes, and for a moment, Anna froze. There was something about his gaze, something unsettling yet mesmerizing. The boy opened his mouth, but no words came out. Instead, he raised his hand to his chest, as if in pain. Anna felt a pang of sympathy. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. The boy nodded, but his expression remained unreadable. He pointed towards the dance floor, where a group of guests were enjoying the live music. "You want to dance?" Anna asked, almost teasingly, but there was no humor in her voice. She had never seen a child so withdrawn, so disconnected from everything around him. To her surprise, the boy nodded. His fragile form slowly rose from the chair, and despite his apparent weakness, there was a certain grace in his movements. Anna hesitated, but then, driven by a sense of compassion, she extended her hand. "All right then, let's dance," she said, offering him a smile. She led him to the center of the floor, her steps slow and deliberate, as she tried to match his delicate pace. The music swirled around them, the soft melody filling the air as the two of them danced. Anna could feel the boy's hand shaking slightly in hers, but there was a strange comfort in the way they moved together. She wasn't sure how long they danced, but time seemed to slow down. The crowd around them blurred, as if the entire world had disappeared. But little did Anna know, she was being watched. From a shadowed corner of the room, a tall, imposing figure stood silently, observing every move they made. His piercing, amber eyes never left the pair. He was a man of immense power, his presence almost suffocating in its intensity. As Anna twirled the boy gently, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. The air around her seemed to grow colder, and she looked up, only to meet the gaze of the man who had been watching them. His eyes burned with an intensity she had never seen before, a gaze that seemed to pierce through her very soul. Anna froze, momentarily caught in his stare. She felt an inexplicable pull, as if the man's eyes held some sort of magnetic force that kept her rooted to the spot. But before she could react, the boy in her arms suddenly stiffened. His body went rigid, his head tilting back as if he were listening to something only he could hear. Anna looked down at him, confused, but the boy said nothing. She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened on her hand. It was then that the man stepped forward, his presence overwhelming the space around them. Anna's heart raced, and she could feel the boy's hand tremble more violently in hers. The man spoke then, his voice low and commanding, yet somehow familiar. "Leave him alone," he said. His words were not directed at Anna, but at the boy. Anna could feel the weight of the moment, as if something monumental was about to unfold. But she had no idea what it was. As the man approached, the boy's grip loosened, and Anna quickly pulled away, her breath shallow. Who was this man? And why did the boy seem so connected to him? The answers were just beyond her reach, and as the man reached out to the boy, Anna realized she was standing on the precipice of something far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. As the man approached, Anna felt a chill run down her spine. The boy, still standing rigid in her arms, seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere. His amber eyes, now wide with fear, locked onto the figure in front of them. Anna, too, could not tear her gaze away. The man's presence was overwhelming. He radiated power, the kind of power that made the very air around him seem to thicken, pressing down on her chest. His tall, imposing figure moved with purpose, each step deliberate and commanding. He was dressed in dark clothing that seemed to absorb the light around him, and his eyes glowed with an almost otherworldly intensity, like smoldering embers. The room seemed to shrink as he closed the distance between them, and the music from the orchestra faded into a muffled blur. Anna could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, racing with anxiety. "What do you want?" Anna finally found her voice, her words coming out in a tremor. The man stopped just a few feet away, his piercing gaze never wavering. He glanced at the boy briefly, then back at Anna. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he said in a voice so smooth, it sent a shiver through her. "But you will soon enough." Anna could feel her palms grow clammy as the weight of his words settled in. She had no idea who he was, but everything about him screamed danger. And yet, there was something else too. Something familiar. Anna's eyes darted to the boy, whose face was still frozen in fear. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice quieter now. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped forward and reached out, gently placing his hand on the boy's shoulder. The boy flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. "He's mine," the man finally said. Anna's mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. "Yours?" she repeated, confused. "My son," he replied, his tone unwavering. Anna's heart skipped a beat. The boy was his son? The realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. She looked down at the boy, seeing him in a whole new light. This wasn't just any child. This was the son of the man standing before her, the man who was now watching her with those unblinking, burning eyes. The boy's condition made sense now. The way he had been so frail, so fragile, was no accident. Anna's mind struggled to comprehend the depth of what was happening. Before she could form another question, the man turned his gaze back to her, his expression hardening. "I don't appreciate people meddling with what is mine," he said coldly. "And I certainly don't appreciate people dancing with my son." Anna felt her stomach twist in knots. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "He asked me to dance. I thought he needed comfort." The man's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a thin, cruel smile. "Comfort," he echoed, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think you can comfort him?" The words stung, but Anna stood her ground. "I was just trying to be kind," she said, her voice firming with each word. "I didn't mean any harm." The man took a step closer, towering over her now. "Kindness doesn't exist in my world," he muttered, his gaze flicking over her with an unsettling coldness. "You don't belong here. And neither does he." He motioned to the boy, who looked even more frightened than before. Anna felt her heart ache for the boy, but she couldn't back down now. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "I want you to leave," he said flatly. "Leave my son alone. And leave this place. Before I decide what to do with you." His words hung in the air like a threat. Anna's mind raced. She had no idea what kind of man he was, but she knew one thing for certain. She didn't want to be on his bad side. "I'm not going anywhere," Anna said, her voice stronger now, though her heart was pounding in her chest. "I won't leave him." The man's eyes glinted with something dark, almost predatory. For a moment, there was silence. Then, without warning, he reached down and picked up the boy effortlessly, cradling him in his arms as if he weighed nothing. "You'll regret this," he warned her, his voice low and menacing. With that, he turned and walked away, his powerful presence causing a ripple in the room as everyone instinctively parted to let him pass. Anna stood there, frozen, unable to tear her eyes away from the scene. What had just happened? Who was this man? And why had he been so protective of the boy? She had a million questions, but none of them seemed to matter anymore. As the man disappeared into the shadows, Anna felt an uneasy calm settle over her. Something told her that this was far from over. She had just stepped into a world she didn't understand, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what was to come next. Anna couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental had just occurred. As she stood there, Watching the man disappear into the shadows with the boy, her mind raced with questions. Who was he? What did he want? And most importantly, why had he been so protective of the child? She had no answers, only a growing sense of dread. The restaurant had returned to its usual hum, but to Anna, it felt like a dream she couldn't wake up from. She went back to her station, her body on autopilot, performing the motions she had done countless times before, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She tried to focus on her work, but it was impossible. Her mind kept drifting back to the boy, the pale, fragile boy who had danced with her just moments ago, and the man who had taken him away as if he were some precious treasure. As the night wore on, Anna's curiosity grew, her need for answers becoming almost unbearable. She had always been a person who believed in kindness and doing what was right, but now she wasn't sure what was right anymore. Her mind kept replaying the moment when the man had spoken to her. "Leave him alone," he had said, "before I decide what to do with you." The words echoed in her mind, sending a chill down her spine. What had she gotten herself into? She couldn't just forget about the boy. Something told her that whatever was happening, whatever world she had unwittingly stepped into, was far from over. The next day, Anna found herself standing outside a large, imposing mansion, the kind of place she had only seen in movies. The gates were tall, made of wrought iron, and there were guards posted at every entrance. She couldn't believe she was here, but she knew she had to be. After hours of tossing and turning, she had finally made the decision. She had to find the boy. She had to make sure he was okay. Anna took a deep breath and pushed open the gate. It creaked loudly, almost as if warning her to turn back. But she didn't. She walked through the courtyard, her heart racing with every step. The mansion loomed in front of her, its stone walls cold and uninviting. It felt like something out of a dark fairy tale, a place where secrets were buried deep and never seen. As she approached the front door, it swung open, and there stood the man. His dark eyes narrowed as he took in her presence. "I told you to stay away," he said, his voice cold and commanding. Anna felt her breath catch in her throat, but she stood her ground. "I had to make sure the boy is all right," she said, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her chest. The man studied her for a moment, his gaze intense and unreadable. Finally, he sighed and stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. "You really don't know what you're dealing with, do you?" he said, his tone softer now, but still laced with warning. Anna stepped inside, the door closing behind her with a soft click. The interior of the mansion was just as imposing as the outside, dark, grand, and full of shadows. She could feel the weight of centuries of history pressing down on her. The boy was sitting in a grand chair by the fireplace, his pale face illuminated by the flickering light. He looked up as Anna entered, his amber eyes locking onto hers. There was a sadness in his gaze, a loneliness that tugged at Anna's heart. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. The boy nodded, but he didn't speak. Anna approached him slowly, not wanting to startle him. She kneeled in front of him, reaching out to gently take his hand. It was cold to the touch, and she could feel the weakness in his fingers. He looked so fragile, so vulnerable. "What's happening to him?" Anna asked, her eyes moving to the man who stood nearby, watching them with a silent intensity. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the boy and placed a hand on his shoulder. "He's cursed," he said quietly, "a curse that has bound him for centuries. No one has been able to break it, not even the most powerful sorcerers." Anna's heart sank. A curse? She had heard stories, of course, but she had never believed in them. Now, standing in this dark mansion with the boy before her, she wasn't so sure anymore. The man looked at Anna, his gaze softening for a moment. "He is my son," he said, his voice filled with an emotion Anna couldn't quite place. "And I will do anything to protect him." Anna swallowed hard, her thoughts swirling. The weight of the situation was becoming too much to bear. She had no idea what she had walked into, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't just walk away. Not now. Not when the boy was so helpless. "What can I do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's eyes flicked to her, and for the first time, she saw a glimmer of something like hope in them. "There may be a way," he said, his voice barely audible, "but it will require a sacrifice." Anna's heart raced. What kind of sacrifice? She didn't know if she was ready for whatever this world demanded, but there was no turning back now. The room felt heavier now, the weight of the man's words lingering in the air like a thick fog. Anna stood there, staring at the boy whose eyes held secrets that seemed too heavy for his fragile body. His pale face was drawn, his body a slight form in the grand chair. But there was something else, something ancient about him that she couldn't understand. The man, standing tall beside the boy, spoke again, his voice filled with quiet urgency. "The curse that binds him is not of this world," he said. "It was cast long before either of us was born, and it has held him in its grip for centuries. It's not just a spell, it's a force, a dark power that no one has been able to break." Anna's heart ached for the boy. She had seen suffering in her life, but this was different. It was more than just physical weakness. It was as though the boy had been trapped in time, unable to break free. "But why him?" Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why has he been cursed?" The man's gaze softened slightly, but there was still an underlying storm in his eyes. "Because he is my son," he replied, his voice thick with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "And because of the choices I made long ago." Anna felt a lump form in her throat. The weight of his words hung in the room, suffocating her with their unspoken meaning. She could see now that the curse wasn't just a matter of magic. It was a deep, personal tragedy that had shaped both of their lives. "What can I do to help?" she asked, stepping closer to the boy. Her heart was heavy with the need to do something, anything, to alleviate the suffering that seemed to radiate from him. The man looked at her, and for a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. "There is a way," he said, his voice low. "But it will not be easy, and it will come at a great cost." Anna's breath caught in her throat. She had known there would be no easy answers, but something in the way he spoke made her wonder just how much she was about to risk. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man moved toward her, his movements slow, deliberate, as though weighing his words carefully. "There is a ritual," he explained, "a way to break the curse. But it requires something that is tied to the very fabric of our world, the life force of one who is pure of heart." Anna's brow furrowed in confusion. "A life force?" she echoed. "But, what do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned his gaze back to the boy, his expression unreadable. "I have been searching for years," he said quietly. "But I cannot do this alone. I need someone who can restore the balance, someone who can break the curse without destroying everything in the process." The words hung heavy in the air. Anna's heart raced. She had no idea what kind of world she had stepped into, but it seemed like the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. "And you think I can do this?" she asked, her voice shaking. The man turned his gaze back to her, his expression intense. "I don't think you can," he said softly. "I know you can." Anna's pulse quickened as his words sank in. She wasn't sure what kind of power he believed she possessed, but there was no turning back now. She couldn't just walk away from this. She couldn't leave the boy to suffer in silence, bound by a curse he had no control over. The man stepped back, moving to the side of the room where a large, ancient-looking book lay on a pedestal. The leather cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age, but there was a sense of power emanating from it. "This is the key," he said, his voice soft but filled with certainty. "This book holds the answers to the ritual. It contains the knowledge needed to break the curse, but it also contains great danger." Anna took a deep breath, her mind spinning with the weight of everything she had just learned. She had no idea what she was getting into, but there was something inside her that knew she had no choice but to follow this path. She had already crossed a line, and there was no going back. As she stepped closer to the book, the man's voice stopped her. "I need to warn you," he said, his tone serious. "The ritual will test you. It will test your will, your strength, your very soul. It is not a path for the faint of heart. But if you succeed, the curse will be broken, and my son will be free." Anna nodded, her resolve hardening. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to back down now. The boy, this child who had so innocently asked her to dance, was depending on her. And for better or worse, she was in this until the end. Anna stood before the ancient book, its leather cover worn from years of use, the weight of what was to come heavy in the air. The man had warned her about the dangers of the ritual, but now, with every step closer, she could feel the gravity of the situation. She was no longer just a waitress in a restaurant. She was entangled in a world she had never believed existed, one filled with power, curses, and ancient secrets. The boy, still sitting near the fireplace, watched her with a silent intensity. His amber eyes flickered, but he said nothing, as if waiting for Anna to make her move. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling as they hovered over the book. The words written in it were foreign to her, the symbols strange and unfamiliar. Yet, something within her seemed to recognize the ancient language, as if a part of her had always known it. Her fingers brushed over the pages, and as she did, she felt a pulse of energy flow through her, as if the book itself was alive, reacting to her touch. A chill ran down her spine. She had never been more aware of the power at play. "This is where it begins," the man said, his voice breaking through the silence. Anna looked up at him, her heart racing. His eyes were fixed on the book, but there was something else in his gaze now, something soft, almost tender. "You have to understand," he continued, his voice low. "The ritual will not only break the curse. It will change everything. For you, for me, for my son. It will bind us in ways that can't be undone." Anna swallowed, trying to steady her nerves. "What do you mean? What will happen?" The man took a step closer, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "The ritual demands a sacrifice," he said, his tone serious. "A life force. And you, Anna, must decide if you are willing to give yours." The words hit Anna like a punch to the gut. A sacrifice? Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked down at the boy, still silently watching her. He was so fragile, so delicate, and yet, in his eyes, there was a depth of sadness that made her heart ache. How could she possibly walk away from this? How could she not try to save him? "What happens if I don't go through with it?" Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's eyes darkened. "Then the curse will never be broken," he replied, "and my son will remain trapped in this state forever. The curse will consume him, and eventually, it will consume me too. I won't let that happen." His voice trembled, a crack of emotion slipping through the stern facade. Anna could see the pain in his eyes, and it made her heart twist. She didn't want to lose him, didn't want to fail. But could she really make such a sacrifice? Could she risk everything for someone she barely knew? "I can't," she whispered. "I can't just give up my life. I don't even know what this world is, what it means." The man stepped closer to her, his expression softening. "You are stronger than you realize," he said, his voice gentle now. "And this world, it's more than you think. You have the power to change things, to break the cycle. It's in you." Anna felt a strange surge of energy as his words sank in. It was as though something deep inside her was waking up, something she hadn't known existed. She had been living a simple life, but now, in this moment, she felt connected to something far greater, something ancient and powerful. As she gazed down at the book again, she knew she couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when the boy's life was on the line. Not when the world had opened up in front of her, offering the chance to make a difference. She took a deep breath, her resolve solidifying. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm. The man's eyes widened slightly, but there was a flicker of hope in them now. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Once we begin, there's no going back." Anna nodded. "I'm sure." She looked down at the book once more, her hands steady now, the energy swirling around her. The ritual was about to begin. The world she had known, the life she had lived, would never be the same again. There was no turning back, no retreating into the life she once had. But as she opened the book, her mind clear and focused, she knew she was ready. For the boy, for the man, for herself. The curse would be broken, no matter the cost. As Anna opened the ancient book, a surge of energy swept through the room, the pages glowing faintly with an ethereal light. She could feel the weight of the moment, the responsibility that had been placed on her shoulders. The ritual was beginning, and everything she had feared, every unknown consequence, was now within reach. The man stood by her side, his eyes filled with both caution and hope, as if he too was unsure of what would come next, but knew that this was the only way. "You must say the words aloud," he instructed, his voice low but steady. "You must not falter, not even once. If you do, the ritual will fail, and all will be lost." Anna nodded, though her heart was racing. She had no idea what the words meant, but somehow, she could feel their power as she spoke them. As the words left her lips, the air seemed to grow thick, almost suffocating, and the room around them began to shift. The shadows on the walls stretched, twisting into dark shapes that writhed and reached toward her. Anna's hand shook, but she did not stop. She couldn't. The boy, still sitting by the fire, was watching her with those amber eyes, his expression unreadable. As the ritual progressed, Anna could see the faintest trace of a smile flicker across his lips, as though he could feel the change beginning, but it was fleeting. His condition had not improved, not yet. The air around them seemed to thrum with energy, vibrating with the power of the ritual. The man watched her intently, his presence a constant reminder of the danger they were in. He had warned her of the cost, but Anna had already made her choice. There was no turning back now. The boy was depending on her, and she couldn't fail him. As the final words of the incantation left her mouth, the book snapped shut with a loud crack, sending a shockwave through the room. The shadows on the walls recoiled, as if they had been burned by the light. The boy gasped, his body jerking upright, his eyes wide with fear. For a moment, everything was still. The room fell silent, the only sound the crackling of the fire. Then, slowly, the boy's breath began to steady, and color slowly returned to his cheeks. It was a subtle change, but to Anna, it was a miracle. She could see it now. He was no longer just a fragile, broken child. There was life in him again. She looked up at the man, whose eyes were now wide with disbelief. "It's working," he whispered, a tremor in his voice. Anna couldn't help but smile. "He's going to be okay," she said softly. But as the words left her mouth, a sudden wave of dizziness hit her. She staggered, her knees weak, as if the energy of the ritual had taken its toll. The man reached out to steady her, his hand gripping her arm firmly. "You need to rest," he said urgently. "The ritual has taken more from you than you realize. It will take time to heal." But Anna couldn't focus on her own exhaustion. Her eyes were fixed on the boy, whose transformation was becoming more evident with each passing second. His breathing was steady, his face no longer pale, and his eyes, those haunting amber eyes, now shone with life. The curse that had held him captive for so long was finally starting to break. But Anna knew this was only the beginning. The ritual had worked, but the cost had been steep. The boy was free from the curse, but at what cost to her? She could feel the energy of the ritual still pulsing through her veins, as though it had become a part of her, a lingering presence that would never leave. The man turned to her, his face a mask of concern. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved him." Anna smiled faintly, though it felt more like a grimace. She was grateful that the boy was free, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the battle wasn't over. The ritual had worked, but there were still consequences to face. "What now?" Anna asked, her voice barely audible. The man took a step closer, his expression darkening. "Now we wait," he said quietly. "The curse is broken, but there are others who will come for him, for us. The forces that bound him are not easily undone, and there are those who will not let this stand." Anna's stomach churned at his words. She had already risked so much, and now it seemed there was even more at stake. The boy was free, but what did that mean for her? What did it mean for the man standing beside her? She had no answers, only the certainty that her life had changed forever. The boy looked up at them, his eyes now clear, his body no longer trembling with weakness. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice soft but filled with gratitude. Anna's heart swelled with relief, but she knew there was no time to rest. The fight was far from over. Anna could feel the weight of the man's words hanging in the air like a storm cloud, ready to break. The boy was free, but the battle was far from over. As she stood in the grand, dimly lit room, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had only just begun to face the consequences of their actions. The man, who had remained silent for a moment, turned his attention back to the boy, who was now standing on his own, his pale complexion finally flushed with color. His amber eyes, once dull and lifeless, were now sharp with curiosity. "You did it," the boy whispered to Anna, his voice fragile but filled with a sense of awe. Anna smiled softly, but it didn't reach her eyes. She knew this moment was fleeting. The curse had been broken, but there were darker forces at play, and they were far from being out of danger. The man stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the boy as if he were trying to assess whether the transformation was permanent. He sighed heavily, a mixture of relief and lingering tension. "You freed him," the man said quietly, his voice almost lost in the vastness of the room. "But there's more we must face. The curse may be gone, but the consequences of breaking it will ripple through our world, and there are those who won't be pleased. Anna felt a chill run down her spine. She had known there would be repercussions, but hearing it confirmed by the man made it feel all the more real. She had unknowingly stepped into a world where nothing was simple, where even the smallest action could have catastrophic effects. "Who will come for us?" she asked, her voice low and hesitant. The man looked down at her, his expression darkening. "There are powerful forces that have been watching us, forces who thrive on maintaining the balance of power. They will not let this go unnoticed. And you," he said, turning his gaze to Anna, "you've made yourself a target." Anna's stomach twisted at his words. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to help." The man's eyes softened, but only slightly. "I know," he said, "but the moment you took part in this ritual, you became entangled in our world. And now, you must face the consequences." He turned to the boy, whose gaze was now filled with understanding. The boy's once lifeless eyes now had a spark of life in them, and Anna felt a mixture of relief and fear. The boy was alive again, but at what cost? "What do we do now?" Anna asked, her voice shaking with uncertainty. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved towards a nearby window, the curtains drawn back to reveal the night sky. His silhouette was framed by the moonlight, casting a long shadow across the floor. "Now, we prepare," he said, his voice cold and calculated. "The forces that will come for us are not merciful, and they will not stop until they have what they want." Anna nodded, though she still had so many questions. She didn't know what kind of world she had stepped into, but she knew she couldn't back out now. Not with the boy depending on her, not with everything that was at stake. The man turned to face her, his gaze intense and unwavering. "You've proven your strength, Anna," he said, his voice tinged with respect. "But this is only the beginning. There will be challenges ahead, and we must be ready for them. The world we live in is not kind to those who defy it." Anna swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over her like a heavy cloak. She had no choice but to face whatever came next. She had already crossed a line, and there was no going back. The boy, her only link to the strange world she had now entered, stood silently by her side, his eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't place. Fear, yes, but also something else, hope. For the first time, Anna realized that hope was a powerful force in a world like this. It could be the thing that saved them all, or it could be the thing that destroyed them. "What do we do first?" Anna asked, her voice steady now, despite the uncertainty churning in her gut. The man stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "We prepare for war," he said simply, "and we do it together." Anna's heart raced as she realized the gravity of what lay ahead. The boy, who had once been trapped by the curse, was now free, but the world they were about to face was far from kind. She didn't know if she was ready for what was coming, but she had no choice. They were in this together now, and no matter how dark the path ahead seemed, she couldn't turn away. The boy needed her, the man needed her, and now, she needed herself. As they stood together in the vast, silent room, Anna knew that whatever came next, they would face it as one. The battle for their lives had only just begun. The tension in the room was palpable as Anna, the boy, and the man stood in uneasy silence. The weight of the upcoming battle loomed over them, heavy and unyielding. The boy, now fully restored, stood close to Anna, his eyes alert and cautious, but also filled with something new, hope. But Anna could sense his unease, the uncertainty of his future now that the curse had been lifted, but it hadn't come without consequences. She looked at the man, the one who had led them into this world of danger, who had brought her into a reality she hadn't even known existed. He stood tall, his posture unwavering, but Anna could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He knew what was coming. They all did. The forces that had watched them, the ones that kept the balance of power, would not let this break in the chain of fate go unnoticed. There was no turning back now. "What happens next?" Anna asked, her voice steady but carrying the weight of her uncertainty. The man turned toward her, his eyes dark and intense, a storm brewing behind them. "We prepare," he said simply, "for everything. They will come for us, and we will have to fight." Anna nodded, her mind still racing. She had never imagined that a simple act of kindness, of dancing with the boy, would lead her here. But now that she was in this world, There was no escaping it. The boy, who had been so frail and sickly just hours ago, now stood strong, his once pale complexion filled with color. But even in his restored state, Anna knew there was something deeper at play. The ritual had broken the curse, but there was something more, something the men had hinted at. But how do we fight? Anna asked, trying to steady her thoughts. We don't have an army. We don't have allies. We only have each other. The man smiled darkly. You're wrong. We do have allies. They are the ones who helped me hide all these years. But not all of them can be trusted. Anna felt her stomach tighten. Who are they? How do we find them? The man's smile faded, replaced by a look of determination. We don't find them. They find us. And when they do, we must be ready. Some of them will be allies. Others will try to use us. Anna felt a chill run down her spine at the man's words. The world she had stumbled into was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. It was a world of power, deceit, and survival. She wasn't just fighting for the boy anymore. She was fighting for her own life. How do we prepare? Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's eyes softened, but only slightly. We train. We gather information. We anticipate their moves. And most importantly, we stay hidden until we are strong enough to fight back. The boy stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room as though he was already preparing for what lay ahead. He looked more mature now, as though the curse had held him back from growing up. Now that it had been lifted, he was no longer the fragile child who had danced with Anna. He was someone else, someone who had the potential to change the course of their fate. I want to fight, the boy said, his voice firm, yet young. I don't want to hide anymore. The man looked at the boy, his expression softening for a moment. You are not ready, he said, his voice quiet but stern. The world you are about to step into is not kind to children. It is a world of darkness and danger, and you are not ready to face it. The boy's eyes flickered with defiance. I'm not a child anymore, he said, his voice low and intense. I've spent my whole life in darkness. I want to change it. Anna watched the exchange, torn between the man's caution and the boy's determination. She knew the boy wanted to be a part of this fight, but she also knew that the world they were about to face was not one that would be kind to him. It was a world where survival meant power, and power meant ruthlessness. We all have our role to play, the man said, his voice filled with authority. But for now, your role is to stay safe. You may not like it, but it's the only way we will survive. The boy looked down, his expression conflicted. He wanted to help, but the man was right. The world they were about to face wasn't one that would forgive weakness. Anna, sensing the tension between them, stepped forward. We'll figure it out, she said, her voice steady. We'll do what we have to do, together. The man nodded slowly, as if weighing her words. Together, then, he said, his voice soft but filled with resolve. But remember, trust no one. The silence in the room was thick, filled with unspoken fears and the weight of what was to come. Anna felt it, too, the looming threat of the unknown, the darkness that was closing in on them. But despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, Anna knew one thing. She couldn't back down. Not now. Not when the boy had been given a second chance at life. Not when the man, despite his cold exterior, had risked everything to protect them. She would face whatever came next, and she would do it with them. Because in this new world, where power was everything and betrayal lurked around every corner, they would need each other more than ever. The days following the ritual were tense and filled with uncertainty. Anna, the boy, and the man spent every moment in preparation, knowing the dark forces that had been watching them were now closing in. Despite the initial relief that the curse had been broken, Anna could feel the weight of the threat looming over them. They could not afford to let their guard down, not even for a moment. The boy, no longer the fragile child he had once been, had become more than just a symbol of hope. He was their key to survival. But the man was right. There was still much more to face. They needed to gather strength, allies, and information. The world they had entered was a dangerous one, and it had no room for weakness. One evening, after a particularly exhausting training session, Anna sat by the window of the mansion, looking out at the darkened landscape. The weight of the situation was starting to take its toll. She had never been one to back down from a challenge, but this was different. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight against an ancient and powerful force, one that would not hesitate to destroy them. She had seen the darkness in the man's eyes, the fear of what would happen if they failed. And yet, there was still a part of him that believed they could win. He had been so certain before the ritual, and even now, as they prepared for whatever would come next, his resolve never wavered. She envied his strength, but she also feared it. The boy approached her, his footsteps soft on the cold marble floor. He was still adjusting to his new sense of self, but he had already begun to show signs of the power that had been awakened in him. His amber eyes were filled with a quiet determination, and despite the uncertainty that weighed heavily on them all, he was no longer afraid. "Anna," he said, his voice barely a whisper. She turned to face him, offering him a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Are you ready?" he asked, his gaze steady. Anna hesitated, feeling the familiar knot of fear twist in her stomach. She wanted to say yes, but the truth was, she didn't know if she was ready. None of them were. The boy had grown strong in the last few days, but he was still just a child. And though the man had trained her, had prepared her for the coming battle, there was still so much she didn't understand. "I don't know if I am," she admitted, her voice soft but honest. "But I don't think we have a choice. We have to do this, for all of us." The boy nodded, stepping closer. "I believe in you," he said, his voice full of quiet confidence. It was a strange thing to hear from someone so young, but Anna could see the strength in him. He wasn't just the boy she had met in the restaurant anymore. He had become something more, something capable of facing the darkness ahead. The man entered the room, his presence commanding and unwavering. "It's time," he said, his voice low. "We can't wait any longer. They are already on their way." Anna stood, her heart pounding in her chest. The reality of what they were about to face finally hit her. There was no turning back now. She had made her choice. They had made their choice. "Let's do this," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. The man nodded, his expression unreadable, but she could see the same determination in his eyes. They moved quickly, gathering their things and preparing for the journey ahead. The boy, though still young, was ready. Anna could see it in his eyes, the same fire that burned in her own. Together, they would face the darkness, together they would fight, and together, they would survive. The mansion doors opened, and the cold night air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of the unknown. The man led the way, his steps sure and measured. Anna followed closely behind, the boy walking at her side, his hand clenched into a fist, as if ready for whatever might come. As they stepped outside, the wind howled, but Anna didn't flinch. She had made her decision. They all had. The path ahead would be long and dangerous, but they would face it together. And whatever happened, she knew one thing. They would not be alone. The forces that had been tracking them, the ones who thrived on the balance of power, would soon make their move. But Anna wasn't afraid anymore. She had the boy by her side, and the man, despite his cold exterior, had proven to be an ally. Together, they were a force, one that the darkness could not break. The world they were about to enter was ruthless, but they were ready. The journey had begun, and there would be no turning back. The journey ahead was treacherous. Anna, the boy, and the man had left the relative safety of the mansion, stepping into the unknown with nothing but their determination and the weight of what was to come. The world outside was cold, the night air biting as it wrapped around them, and the moon hung high above, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. They walked in silence for hours, the only sounds being the soft crunch of their footsteps on the frozen ground and the distant howling of the wind. Anna had no idea where they were headed, but she trusted the man. He had a plan, and that was all she needed to know. Her mind kept drifting back to the boy. He had changed so much in such a short time. The fragile child who had once danced in a restaurant now seemed to carry an air of strength and resolve. His once sickly frame had filled out, his eyes no longer dull but sharp and full of life. Yet, despite his outward transformation, Anna could see the uncertainty in him, the fear of what would come next. She couldn't blame him. She felt it too. They were being hunted, and nothing in this world was more dangerous than a hunter who had been waiting for years. The man had been clear about that. "They will come for us," he had said, his voice low and filled with warning. "And when they do, we must be ready." Anna could only imagine who they were. She had no idea what kind of enemies they faced, but the look in the man's eyes told her that whoever they were powerful. As they pressed on through the night, Anna found herself questioning everything. She had never believed in magic, in curses, in anything supernatural. But now, standing beside the boy, feeling the weight of the ritual's power still lingering in the air, she had no choice but to accept the reality of the world she had entered. There was no turning back. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them. The man glanced over at her, his face unreadable. "To the last place they would expect us to go," he replied cryptically. Anna frowned, but said nothing more. She had learned long ago that some things weren't meant to be explained. She had to trust him, even when it felt like she was walking blindly into a storm. As they continued their journey, Anna's thoughts kept circling back to the boy. She had grown attached to him in ways she hadn't expected. He wasn't just the cursed child anymore. He was someone she cared about, someone she would fight for, even if she didn't fully understand the world they were up against. Eventually, they arrived at a small, abandoned cabin nestled in the woods. It was old, the wood weathered and gray, but it stood firm, as if it had been waiting for them. The man led them inside, the door creaking as he pushed it open. The interior was sparse but functional, with a small fireplace at one end and a few pieces of old furniture scattered around. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. "We'll rest here for the night," the man said as he moved toward the fireplace. "Tomorrow, we begin the next phase of the plan." Anna nodded, grateful for the temporary reprieve. She was exhausted, her body sore from the long walk, but the thought of resting brought little comfort. She knew that once they woke, they would be back on the road, running, hiding, waiting for the storm to catch up with them. The boy sat down near the fire, staring into the flames with a distant look in his eyes. Anna watched him for a moment before sitting beside him. She wanted to say something, anything to reassure him, but she didn't know how. She didn't have any answers, not for him, not for herself. But one thing was certain, they were in this together. "Are you okay?" Anna asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The boy turned his gaze to her, his amber eyes dark with something Anna couldn't quite place. "I'm fine," he said, though his voice was hollow. "I just don't understand what's happening. Everything's changed, but nothing feels different." Anna sighed, her heart aching for him. She could see the confusion in his eyes, the weight of the transformation he had gone through, and she understood. How could he process it all? How could any of them? "We'll figure it out," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "We're not alone in this." The boy nodded slowly, but Anna could see the doubt still lingering in his expression. She couldn't blame him. The world they had entered was far from kind, and every day brought a new challenge. But in that moment, as they sat by the fire, Anna made a promise to herself. She would protect him, no matter what. The man moved to the small table, unpacking a few supplies and setting them down. He was focused, his mind clearly on the task at hand, but Anna could see the exhaustion in his eyes as well. The strain of the journey, the burden of their mission, was taking its toll. On all of them. As the night wore on, they huddled together in the cabin, the warmth of the fire offering a brief respite from the cold. But Anna couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something darker than they could possibly imagine. They had only just begun to fight, and the hardest part was still ahead. She had no idea what they would face, but she knew one thing. She couldn't afford to be afraid. Not now. Not when the boy and the man were depending on her. She could hear the wind howling outside, a reminder that the storm was still out there, waiting. But for now, they had each other. And for that, Anna was grateful. The night was long, and the silence inside the cabin was deafening. The wind howled outside, but inside, there was only the crackling of the fire and the occasional rustle of the boy moving in his sleep. Anna had tried to rest, but her mind wouldn't let her. She kept replaying everything in her head, the ritual, the man's words, the boy's transformation. Despite their victory, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were not truly free. The world they were in was far from kind, and every step they took felt like a countdown to something worse. The boy had fallen asleep by the fire, his body exhausted from the days of travel, his mind still processing everything that had happened. Anna watched him, her heart heavy with the knowledge that he had been through so much more than any child should have to endure. The man had said they were not alone in this, that they had allies, but Anna wasn't sure who to trust. They had already encountered so many dangers, so many enemies, and the thought of more coming after them made her stomach churn. The man had become their protector, their guide through this dark world, but even he had his secrets. Anna had never been one to trust easily, but now, surrounded by this strange new reality, trust seemed like a luxury they couldn't afford. The boy stirred in his sleep, and Anna's gaze softened. She couldn't let him down, not now. Not after everything he had been through. He had been cursed for so long, and now, in a matter of days, everything had changed. But was it enough? Was it truly over? Anna didn't have the answers, but she couldn't rest until she had tried. She stood up, moving quietly across the room to where the man was sitting by the table, poring over a set of ancient maps. His face was etched with exhaustion, the strain of their journey visible in the way he moved, but his eyes were sharp, never losing focus on the task at hand. Anna hesitated for a moment before speaking. "What happens next?" she asked, her voice low. The man didn't look up from the maps, but he spoke with a calmness that was almost unnerving. "We move. We can't stay here for long." Anna frowned, stepping closer. "But where are we going? What's the plan?" He looked up then, his gaze meeting hers, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "We have to reach the gathering," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "It's the only place where we can truly be safe. But it's not easy to get to. There are forces out there that will stop at nothing to keep us from reaching it." Anna's heart raced. The gathering. It was a name that carried weight, but she had no idea what it meant or where it was. All she knew was that it was their only hope. "And how do we get there?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man paused for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. "We'll have to cross dangerous lands, travel through territories controlled by our enemies. But we have no choice. The gathering is the only place where we can regroup, find allies, and prepare for what comes next." Anna nodded, though fear gnawed at her insides. "And if we don't make it?" The man's expression hardened, his jaw tightening as he looked away. "If we don't make it, then we're as good as dead." Anna took a deep breath, trying to calm the rising panic in her chest. She had known this was coming. She had known they wouldn't just be able to hide. But hearing the man's blunt words hit her harder than she had expected. They were not safe. Not yet. The boy shifted again, waking up from his light sleep. His eyes fluttered open, and he looked around, his gaze resting on Anna. There was a brief moment of confusion before his eyes sharpened, as if remembering everything that had happened. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. "Where are we going?" he asked quietly, his voice still hoarse from disuse. Anna smiled softly at him, trying to mask her own uncertainty. "We're going to a place called the Gathering," she said. "It's where we'll be safe. For now." The boy nodded, but Anna could see the doubt in his eyes. He had been through too much to believe in safety now, and Anna couldn't blame him. She didn't know what they would face when they left the cabin. She didn't know what kind of dangers awaited them, or if they were truly ready for what was coming. But they had no choice. The boy, the man, and she, they were all in this together, and they had to face it head on. The man stood up, folding the maps carefully and tucking them into his bag. "We leave at dawn," he said, his voice low and final. "Get what rest you can. Tomorrow, we start the next phase of our journey." Anna nodded, though sleep seemed impossible. She turned back to the boy, who was staring into the fire, his face expressionless. She could feel the tension building, the storm that was coming. But she wasn't going to let fear control her. Not now. Not when they had come this far. She wouldn't back down. Not when the boy, who had already lost so much, was depending on her. She sat down beside him, offering a silent reassurance. He looked up at her, his eyes meeting hers. And in that moment, she knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. The morning came too quickly, the soft light of dawn creeping through the cracks in the cabin walls. Anna was already awake, her mind swirling with thoughts of what lay ahead. The plan was set. There was no turning back now. They had to leave, and they had to leave soon. The man had been clear. The gathering was their only chance for survival, their only chance to regroup and prepare for the forces that were closing in on them. She sat up, rubbing her eyes as the boy stirred beside her. His once fragile form had grown stronger, but there was still a shadow of uncertainty in his eyes. Anna didn't blame him. She shared the same fears. The world they had stepped into was full of dangers, and they were only beginning to scratch the surface. The man, who had remained silent as always, was already preparing their things, his movements methodical, his focus unshaken. Anna knew he had lived in this world for far longer than she had, but it was hard not to wonder if even he truly understood what they were up against. The boy had been through so much, cursed for years, and then freed, only to be thrust into a world that saw him as a target. Anna couldn't bear the thought of losing him, not when he had been given a second chance at life. She stood and walked over to him, the quiet crunch of her boots on the wooden floor the only sound in the room. He was packing their supplies into a small bag, his back to her. "Are you ready?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man didn't turn around immediately, but his response was quiet, almost contemplative. "I'm never ready. But this is our only choice." Anna didn't know how to respond to that. She understood, more than anyone, the weight of the situation. But the reality of what they were facing was beginning to settle in her bones. They weren't just running from the forces that had already pursued them. They were running into unknown territory, into a place where even their most trusted allies might turn against them. The boy, now standing beside Anna, looked up at the man. "Are we really ready for this?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. The man paused, his shoulders stiffening for just a moment before he turned to face them. "No," he said bluntly, "but we don't have a choice. The world doesn't wait for you to be ready." The boy nodded, though the doubt didn't leave his eyes. Anna could see it in the way he stood, shoulders slightly hunched, as if bracing for what was to come. She could feel it too. The tension was palpable, and with every passing second, it felt like the world was closing in on them. The man reached into his bag and pulled out a small, intricately carved stone. It was nothing extraordinary at first glance, but the way the man held it, delicately, as though it were the most precious thing in the world, told Anna it was anything but ordinary. He handed it to the boy. "This will protect you," he said. The boy took the stone, turning it over in his hand, examining it as though he could sense its significance. "How?" he asked. "It will shield you from the magic that seeks to control you," the man explained, his tone serious. "But it won't last forever. Once they realize what we're doing, they will come for us in full force. This is just a temporary safeguard." Anna watched the boy carefully as he slid the stone into his pocket. She could see the resolve settling over him, the fire that had been awakened in him growing stronger. He wasn't a child anymore. He had become something more, someone capable of standing beside them in the face of the storm. The man turned away, gathering the last of their things. "We leave now," he said. "We can't afford to waste any more time." Anna nodded, her heart heavy but her resolve unshaken. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. The boy followed the man outside, his footsteps quick but measured, his eyes scanning the area as if expecting danger at any moment. Anna hesitated for a moment before following. She could feel the cold morning air biting at her skin as she stepped outside, but the chill in the air was nothing compared to the cold dread that was settling in her chest. The world outside was unfamiliar, filled with unknown dangers. Every step they took felt like a step into the unknown. The man led the way, his pace steady, and despite the unease that gripped Anna's heart, she followed without question. They couldn't afford to stop. Not now. The boy kept close to Anna, his hand tight around the stone, his eyes darting to the horizon as if waiting for something to appear. The air felt thick, charged with an energy that made Anna's skin prickle. She couldn't explain it, but she knew something was coming. They were not alone, and whatever waited for them in the shadows, they would face it together. The journey to the gathering had begun, but Anna knew this was only the first step. The road ahead would be long and filled with unimaginable challenges. But they were no longer just running from something. They were running toward something, toward hope, toward freedom. Whatever happened next, they had each other. And for now, that was enough. The road to the gathering was harder than they had anticipated. Each step seemed to bring them deeper into enemy territory, the air heavy with the unspoken threat of what loomed ahead. Anna, the boy, and the man moved cautiously, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. The boy, though still young, had become an integral part of their journey, his strength growing with each passing day. The stone the man had given him hung securely in his pocket, a constant reminder of the danger that surrounded them. The journey had been grueling, the path winding through dense forests and rocky terrain, but they pressed on. The man, who had become their guide and protector, led them with unwavering confidence. Yet, even he seemed to be on edge, his every movement calculated, as though he expected something to jump out of the shadows at any moment. Anna kept close to the boy, offering what little comfort she could. She knew that they had come a long way, but she also knew that the most difficult part of their journey was yet to come. They were nearing the gathering, but the closer they got, the more the danger seemed to intensify. Strange sounds filled the air, distant howls, whispers carried by the wind, and every now and then, Anna would catch a flicker of movement in the trees. She wasn't sure if it was just her imagination, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "We're almost there," the man said one evening as they made camp. The boy, sitting by the fire, looked up at him. "But how will we know when we get there?" he asked. The man's gaze darkened as he looked into the distance. "The gathering isn't a place you find easily. It's hidden, protected by ancient magic. Only those who know how to reach it can do so. The rest of the world is kept in the dark." Anna could feel the tension in the air as the man spoke. The gathering was no ordinary place, and it seemed to carry with it a weight of secrets that even the man wasn't fully willing to share. "And if we can't reach it?" Anna asked, her voice low. The man didn't answer immediately. He just stared into the fire, his face shadowed. "We will," he said finally, his voice steady but with a quiet edge of urgency. "We have no choice." They didn't speak much after that. The silence was thick with the weight of their journey, the unknown dangers ahead, and the sense that time was running out. As they settled down for the night, Anna found herself lying awake, staring up at the stars. The boy had fallen asleep beside her, his chest rising and falling steadily. She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from his face, her heart aching for him. He had been through so much, and now, despite the progress they had made, the hardest part was still ahead. They were close to the gathering, but Anna couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle had yet to begin. The boy stirred in his sleep, mumbling softly, and Anna's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden sound of footsteps. She sat up quickly, her heart racing. The man, who had been standing guard, moved toward them, his face grim. "They found us," he said quietly, his voice cold and hard. Anna's heart skipped a beat as she stood up, instinctively pulling the boy closer to her. "Who?" she asked. The man didn't answer, but Anna could see the tension in his body as he looked into the darkness. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice firm. "Get ready. They'll be here soon." Anna's breath caught in her throat as she realized the gravity of the situation. The gathering had never seemed so far away, and the reality of what they were facing was more terrifying than anything she had imagined. The man moved quickly, checking their supplies, ensuring they were ready for the confrontation. "Stay close," he said, his voice commanding but reassuring. "We'll fight, but we have to be smart." The boy, though still young, had become resolute. He stood up, his eyes burning with determination. "I won't run," he said, his voice firm. Anna looked at him, seeing the strength in his eyes. He had changed so much, not just physically but mentally. He had grown up in ways that no child should have to. But Anna knew that this was the moment they had all been waiting for. The battle would define them, shape their futures. The darkness was closing in, but they had each other, and that was more than enough. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and Anna felt the air grow heavy with the presence of their enemies. She glanced at the man, who nodded to her, signaling that it was time. They stood together, ready to face whatever came next. As the enemies emerged from the shadows, Anna felt the adrenaline surge through her veins. She wasn't sure if they would survive this, but she knew one thing for sure. They would fight with everything they had. The man stepped forward, his eyes locked onto their enemies, a silent promise in his gaze. He would protect them, no matter the cost. And Anna, with the boy by her side, would do the same. The battle had begun,